Yesterday, we saw the first reveals from the Glory of Team Rocket set over in Japan. These cards look really, really impressive. They've kind of spawned a lot of debate as to whether these cards actually look like they're going to be played or not, but I've really been impressed with the first reveals from this set. We've got some pretty interesting cards, some very, very powerful trainers, and I think this Mewtwo is going to be the real deal. I think it's a pretty good card, so let's jump straight into it, kicking us off with the Spidops. Spidops obviously evolves from the Rocket's Tarantula. These are all like owner's Pokemon, similar to things like Zoroark and stuff like that. So there's going to be lots of synergies with Rocket's Mons, and you're going to have to evolve them from the specific Rocket's Tarantula, not just any Tarantula. But that's okay. Has that charge-up ability. Once during a turn, you may attach a basic energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon. We've actually seen this ability in the past with Naganadel. This Naganadel was really, really good. It saw a lot of play in the Blounds archetype, but also saw play in the Quagnag archetype, which was kind of not always top tier, but it was definitely a like off-meta pick that had some decent results. Joe loved the Quagnag deck, so I'm sure he's going to be happy to see this back. We kind of have a functional reprint to the Quag as well. We have Armor Rouge, which is in I think it's the base Scarlet and Violet set, or one of the early Scarlet and Violet sets. And basically that sort of combo let you attach energy to your Spidops from the discard pile, and then use the ability from, in this case, it will be Armor Rouge, to push them up to the active to be able to power something up in one turn. So I think there's definitely potential there, but more interestingly, there's definitely going to be potential with the Rocket's Mewtwo that I'll get to momentarily. It also have the Rocket Rush attack, which isn't terrible. It deals 30 damage times the number of Rocket's Pokemon in play. And to be honest, it's nice for this to actually have an attack. It's a shame it kind of forces you to play Grass Energy. We're not necessarily going to be playing Grass Energy in the Mewtwo deck. We might have to play something else. But this doesn't specify you have to attach Grass Energy to it with the ability. So because of that, we can play Grass and we can potentially use Rocket Rush. But we can also potentially just use the Spidops' ability in any deck that wants some extra energy acceleration. There's quite a lot of interesting attackers out there right now which we could use this in. There's, like I say, there's the Armor Rouge to push stuff up with things like the new Ethan's Magcargo, which may be a few too many stage ones, but there's options there. But yeah, I think the big one is going to be this Rocket's Mewtwo. Rocket's Mewtwo is a very, very strong card, I think. 280 HP on a basic Pokemon is absurd. And to be honest, that for me is one of the biggest selling points of this card. I think that's why I'm struggling to see how this card is going to end up being underwhelming, because at the end of the day, you have 280 HP, you're only giving up 2 prizes. That's the HP of like a stage 1 EX, which is pretty crazy. It means that you're really going to force quite a lot of resources out of the opponent. You are weak to Dark, so if the Ends deck does quite well, or if things like Roaring Moon or Ancient Box post-rotation do end up being very popular, that's going to be, potentially a bit of a worry. But I think in general, having 280 HP is just going to be so tanky that there'll be games where you can just force your opponent to have to go through at least 2 of these, which is an absurd amount of damage. Like I say, this is stage 1 EX level HP compared to like the usual 220 or 230 that we see on a lot of basic EX Pokemon. So yeah, very, very powerful in the HP department. Has the Power Saver ability that says this Pokemon can't attack unless you have 4 or more Rocket's Pokemon in play. So yeah, it does count itself, so you only need 3 Rocket's Pokemon on the bench, but that is a bit of a downside. We've seen abilities... What else do we have? We have the Magma Groudon, which I have here, which had something similar, which was a very, very strong card. There was the Latias GX, which had a similar ability, but then, again, we typically attacked with that in other ways, so we didn't need to get around that ability. But, yeah, this is definitely a downside. I think it's, to be honest, probably to make sure this card isn't way over the top, because I think otherwise this card would be crazy good. Having to have 3 on the bench isn't terrible. If you're going to have a couple of Spidops, you'll see when we talk about the Deletion Sphere attack, it's going to make sense to have a couple of Spidops on the board anyway. But if you've got a couple of Spidops and a backup Mewtwo, that's actually it covers the Power Saver ability already. So it's not like you have to have this crazy board of like lots of different complicated Rocket's Pokemon. I think you can get away with just 2 Rocket's Mewtwo and 2 Rocket Spidops, and you're there. And that gives you at least 2 deck spaces or bench spaces to be able to then put down your Squawkabillies, put down your Fezzes and stuff like that. Obviously, if you want to be able to power one up in a turn, you might have to have a 3rd Spidops and things like that. And similarly, if you want to be able to have a much wider bench, you may need a Terra Pokemon, and then to be playing something like Area Zero Under Depths, we'll have to wait and see how these decks are going to be built. But I think this ability isn't actually as scary as it seems, and since Rocket's Tarantula also counts, like if you're in a position where you don't need both of the Spidops, or you're attacking without the Spidops early on, it's not like the Tarantulas don't count. So you still are able to use the Tarantulas to get around this Power Saver ability and still attack quite quickly with the deck. You may not be able to do the full damage with Deletion Sphere, which again we'll get to in a second, but it's not like you have to have the Spidops for this to be working. You can still use this as an attacker. It's not super efficient. It's not going to be taking one-shots on some of the big EXs without the additional support from Spidops, but it's not like you're waiting for Spidops for this to work. You can still attack. Onto the attack then, Deletion Sphere deals 160 damage for Psychic Colorless, and you may discard up to 2 energy from your bench Pokemon, and you do 60 more damage for each card you discarded this way. So it does have to be card. You'll see down here we have a brand new energy that counts for 2 energy for Rocket's Pokemon, but that would only count for 60, so, that would only count for 60, so that's you're still going to have to get rid of 2 cards, but that does hit a pretty important number, 280. Again, 1, that hits Mewtwo, so your Mewtwo is going to be able to take out other Mewtwo's, which is important. 2, again, 280 seems to be a pretty good number for Stage 1 EXs. There's some that go over that range into 290, 300. But a lot of the Stage 1 EXs are 280 or below, so you're going to be able to trade up into the Evolving EXs, which is pretty good. You always want your Basics to be able to trade up into Evolution Pokemon because Basics typically require less setup and less effort to put into them. So being able to get more value out of them, or being able to get value out of them from Basics compared to Evolutions, is always really good. But also, again, just having that variable damage. 160 deals with things like Squawk and some 1 prizes, so you don't need to ever have to worry about setting up multiple Rocket Spidops. And you can even use Rocket Spidops in those matchups to be able to have a 1 prize attacker too. The fact this sets itself up is really, really nice. But also, so you've got 160 for dealing with the 1 prizes and Squawk. You've got 280 for the big Stage 1 EXs, and you've got 220 for things like the stage or the basic EXs, the typical, I guess, basic EXs that we see that have like the around 200 to 220 range. There are some basic EXs that have a little bit higher that we have to keep in mind. Anything with 230, things like your Iron Hands and stuff like that, we are going to need some kind of modifier for, or maybe the extra energy discard. But I still think any attacker that has like this variable damage is really, really good. I've seen a lot of people comparing this to the likes of Reshiram, where Reshiram had, again, really variable damage and hit 270, which at the time was a very, very relevant number. But to me, the difference is this does a base of 160 no matter what, whereas you had to be discarding energy to get any value out of this at all. And that meant, like, Reshiram couldn't be self-sufficient. It could never attack without having something else on the bench. Whereas, yes, you're only dealing 160, but at least you're doing something with this attacker. You don't have to wait. You're able to at least do a little bit of something. It's not ever going to be great dealing 160 if you don't have a bench to rely on and have the extra Spidops to try and get you to the big numbers. But this is a self-sufficient card in a way as well. So, yeah, I think this card is really good. The fact we have 280 HP, like, alone just is mind-boggling to me. I think it's crazy. And I think that's what's going to push the card. The archetype also has, like, so much good support. All of the Rocket's trainers or Rocket supporters that we've seen so far synergize with having Rocket's Pokemon on the board, so it's going to have a good engine behind it as well. So because of that, I think this is really, really, really powerful. Obviously, the big question is how do we deal with the Stage 2 EXs, the 320s, 330s, 340s, even the 300s of things like Archaludon. That's where I think the card is the weakest, dealing with those Stage 2 EXs, and I think there's going to be... it wouldn't surprise me. Obviously, we've only seen like 13 cards of the set so far, so there may be some damage modification in the set anyway. But assuming we don't get any damage mod in the set, we still have things like Black Belt, which is interesting. Again, we have such good Rockets supporters, it's going to be costly to be using a Black Belt. But if that Black Belt is getting you a KO, in the same way that any one of these supporters like this Giovanni, which is effectively a Guzma, would get you a KO, that's very much similar to just using a Black Bolt for a KO. So, yeah, it feels kind of similar. So I think you're probably ever only going to play one Black Belt, but there's that option. There's tools that we have. Maximum Belt takes this up to 330, which means it's knocking out pretty much anything other than the 340 stuff, which is really impressive. So that is your A-Spec. Again, it spends your A-Spec, but you may only need to take one of those attacks per turn, or per game, sorry, and you may be able to weave your way around like the rest of the board using Deletion Sphere on other things, or maybe even using the Spidops to clean up one prizes. So we have multiple ways of being able to deal more than just the 280 that this has. Again, they're not obvious, they're not super clean, but so, like that's how decks, like sometimes that's just the downside of the deck. I think the weakest part of this deck will be the fact it can't deal with stage 2 EXs. But the fact we have options for doing that is really important. So yeah, I'm not too worried that this can't deal with some of the stage 2s without some support. I think we're potentially likely to see some support from the set, but also I think we have a lot of options right now where we can, we can manufacture this damage to be able to do the numbers we need it to do. So yeah, very, very powerful. Let me know what you think down below as to whether this card is good. I'm pretty sure it's good, but I'm really, really interested to hear your thoughts. The next EX Pokemon that was revealed was Rocket's Persian EX. This is a really interesting card. Arrogant Order for 2 energy. Forces your opponent to reveal the top 10 cards of their deck, and then you may choose an attack from one of the Pokemon you find there and use it as this attack. Now, that's a really cool effect, but I think a lot of the time that's going to be pretty unreliable. There are so many different decks in the Pokemon trading card game, you're never going to reliably know what this is going to be doing. So sometimes you'll hit a Dragapult and that'll be great, and you'll be able to deal 260 to the bench for just theoretically, assuming you're going to be using this Rocket's energy to power this up for just one attachment. But sometimes you'll hit a Dreepy and you'll do 2 for 40, and it's going to seem really, really weak. Similarly, there'll be decks that have very varied attacks, like the Ogerpon box, which could be really good for this because your opponent could reveal a multitude of different attackers because they're playing this box-style archetype where there's lots of different attackers for different situations, and you could be able to use the exact attack you need for that situation with Arrogant Order. So that's pretty cool, but I think it's going to be way too unreliable for this to actually be a functional archetype or like a high-tier functional archetype without some way of being able to manipulate the top of your opponent's deck. We have a couple of ways, I believe, in format that you can do that, but even if we don't, even if we do, I don't think they're reliable enough for this to be able to have a powerful effect every turn. And I don't think Pokemon can really print something that is reliable enough. It would have to be something like putting a Pokemon for your opponent's discard pile onto the top of their deck or something like that, because you couldn't have it taking it off the board. That's way too strong. So I think in general, it's going to be really hard to have this effect be consistent enough for it to be a powerful deck. But it's a very, very cool one nonetheless. And I think it's going to be a really good one for highlight reel moments. Again, imagine you're playing this against the Ogerpon box deck and you hit one of their various different attackers that is perfect for that situation, or you're able to maybe like attack 100 damage and 20 to the, or 80 to the bench Hoots and take out both Hoots or something like that. So there will be some highlight reel moments, but I'm pretty sure this isn't going to be strong enough. And similarly, Cruel Slash does 140 for 3 energy and confuses the opponent. But again, that's just way too weak for it to be a reliable archetype. The next interesting Pokemon is Rocket's Porygon-Z with the Control R attack. I really hope it's called Control R in English because I just think that's a great name. The attack does 20 damage for each supporter in a discard pile with Team Rockets in its name. We have 3 so far. We have Ariana, we have Archer, and we have Giovanni. All 3 of them are pretty good. I think Ariana's the weakest, but Archer and Giovanni are very, very strong. But at the moment, the most you can be doing with this is 240 for 3 energy. And I think that's not going to be good enough even on a one-prizer because of what we said about the importance of hitting at least 280 in the new format compared to, with a basic Pokemon compared to a stage 1. That being said, if we get more Rocket supporters, which we could, there are plenty of Rocket's admins that they haven't revealed. If we see, like, this guy I believe is called Palmer. I think that's his name anyway. We could see a Palmer. Maybe that's Archer. I don't know. I don't know my Rocket lore well enough, but I think there's one called Palmer as well or something like that. So we could see more of these Rockets admins. And if that's the case, we could see this attack get some pretty interesting numbers. But as the stage 1, I don't think it's going to be quite good enough. However, the stage 2 does have the attack as well, and it's just for 2 energy, which is much, much better because it means we can use the Rocket's energy. I mean, we can use the reversal energy, I guess, on the Rocket's Porygon, but it means we have the Rocket's energy as well as the reversal energy to be able to use on the Porygon-Z. And also it has the Reconstitute ability, which lets you discard 2 cards from your hand and then draw a card. So you can discard some supporters you don't need, draw a card, and then potentially use Control R to try and take some knockouts here and there. We've seen archetypes very similar to this in the past. They very rarely are super strong, particularly when they're on an evolution Pokemon. They're typically stronger. You know, things like Night March and stuff were good because they were all basic Pokemon. Things like Lost March, United Wings, even to an extent, feels better than this because it's all basic Pokemon, or the majority of them are basic Pokemon, apart from the Dartrix, I guess. So yeah, I think in general, this seems quite weak, but it could be an interesting archetype if we do get more of these Rocket supporters, and I guess a reliable way outside of just Reconstitute to be able to discard these supporters. It's kind of awkward because these supporters are also good. You don't want to be discarding them for the sake of it. You really want to try and get use out of them. You know, Giovanni is essentially Guzma. Archer is essentially Roxanne. Ariana is, I guess, similar to Cynthia's Ambition. Was that what it's called? Or Cynthia's... No, I can't remember what... Cynthia's Guide... No, it's Cynthia's Ambition. The one that drew up to 8 that is about to rotate. Similar to that. I think in general, all of these are really, really strong, so you don't really want to just be discarding them to, or playing them to just discard them to get the Control R damage up. So I think we're going to have to see some pretty unique cards to be able to see this card bit having potential. You know, ways of maybe discarding supporters but getting the effect out of them or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting archetype. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be strong enough, but at least the Porygon-Z does indeed let you use the Team Rocket's energy, which is going to be pretty powerful. Onto the trainers then, and Team Rocket's receiver is super simple. Lets you search your deck for a supporter card with Rocket in its name and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. That's fantastic, given that these supporters are not just like generically good all the time. They're useful in specific scenarios. Like I say, Giovanni is essentially Guzma. Archer is essentially Roxanne, and Ariana is very similar to Cynthia's Guidance. No, Cynthia's Ambition. I can't remember which one it is. I'm sure it's Ambition. So you need to... they're the kind of supporters that you want on specific turns. So having, like, Rocket's receiver to be able to find them is going to be really, really good. I think you're going to probably play a couple of these. I don't think you're necessarily going to play 4 of these. But similarly, I don't think you're going to be playing 4 of these, like, Guzma or Roxanne-style effects, because you're going to want them... they're not going to be active, or they're not going to be useful on every turn. So being able to have a thinner count of these supporters and then pad it all out with receivers, which can turn into any one of them on the specific turn, means that these supporters, I think, are going to be even better than they normally would be, because I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to be able to find them at the right turns, which is, yeah, it's going to be really, really strong. So yeah, as I mentioned, Ariana is the first one, Team Rocket's Ariana. You draw cards until you have 5 in hand. If all of your Pokemon in play are Rocket's Pokemon, you draw until you have 8 instead. We talk quite a lot about the draw supporters in the game, and how it has to be a pretty good draw supporter for it to compete with the likes of Iona and Research. Those two are very, very powerful supporters, like outright. I think this can do it. I think in the Rocket's deck, this is actually going to be powerful enough, because drawing until you have 8 is pretty impressive. As long as the deck has ways of thinning the hand down, which it should do, you know, Ultra Balls and things like that, all of those are still in format. Things like the Earthen Vessel as well. All of these ways of thinning out the hand, they're obviously all good ways of being able to discard basic energy as well for the Spidops and the Mewtwo's attack. So I think there's a lot of ways that we can potentially, you know, discard the hand or thin the hand down to be able to get a lot of value from Ariana, where it actually could compete with the likes of Research in this archetype to be able to be one of the primary draw supporters. I think it's probably still going to play Research because of the raw draw, like the discard synergies that you have. But regardless, like, this seems like a really, really powerful supplementary draw supporter that you're going to be able to find, again, at the like specific key times with Receiver. Archer's the next one. You can only play this card if one of your Team Rocket's Pokemon was knocked out during your opponent's last turn. If you do, each player shuffles their hand into their deck, then you draw 5, and your opponent draws 3. Yeah, this is essentially Roxanne. You get 1 less card, but you don't have to be down to 3 prizes to be able to play it, which is pretty impressive. It's kind of like Unfair Stamp, in that you can play it as soon as your opponent takes a KO, but also it's not your ace spec, so you can play this alongside Prime Catcher or anything like that, which is very, very powerful, in the same way that you can play Unfair Stamp at the same time as Boss or something. So yeah, another really, really powerful supporter. Again, obviously drawing 5 instead of 6 is a little bit worse, but I think the trade-off of being able to potentially do this from turn 2 is very powerful, and being able to do this multiple times if you play a couple, and again, find them on the right turns with Receiver, is going to be very, very strong. I think, interestingly, I like that this is a Rocket-specific thing because it means that we're not going to fall back into the realms of every deck playing Roxanne. We have Iono, which I think is a bit of a healthier supporter than a card like this. So limiting this to one archetype, I think, is very, very good for the health of the game. But regardless, yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a 1 or 2 of at present, based on the cards we've already seen in the archetype, because, yeah, very, very powerful effect that you can also pair with a strong, ace spec or anything like that as well. And then similarly, Giovanni is another crazy strong card that lets you switch your active Rockets Pokemon with one of your benched Rockets Pokemon, so they both have to be Rockets. But if you do, you can then switch your opponent's benched Pokemon with their active Pokemon. So it's essentially Guzma, but you have to have Rockets Pokemon on your board. But again, I'm pretty sure this archetype is very likely to have a lot of Rockets Pokemon on the board because you're going to need them for the Power Saver ability to be offline. So because of that, I think that's not going to be too much of an issue. Similarly, you can always like go into a Spidops or something and then pay retreat and charge back up the energy. So, it's not like you need to have multiple Mewtwo's down or anything like that. There's multiple ways you can get around having to have Rockets Pokemon on your board to get the full effect. And we've seen how strong this effect is. This is Prime Catcher, which is one of the best, if not the best, ace specs we have out there. This is Guzma, which was up to a 4 of in every single deck while it was out. Yeah, this is going to be very, very strong. Again, very glad it's limited to the Rockets archetype because I think we already have Boss, and I'm not the biggest fan of Boss. I'm not the biggest fan of like Unconditional Gust, but I like this Gust being specific to an archetype, I guess. Again, I would much rather not have Unconditional Gust, but I think this is conditional, and this is conditional in a way, and I think this is conditional in a way that it won't feel like it would feel horrible if everything got Guzma back. But this is a pretty healthy way of doing it. And again, because this is a supporter, you could potentially use this alongside an Unfair Stamp or something, which is going to be very, very powerful for the Mewtwo deck or the Rockets deck that you play this in other than Mewtwo, which I do expect will get more Rockets Pokemon simply because the Team Rockets energy is very, very powerful, but it talks about Psychic and Dark Pokemon, and so far we've obviously only seen the Psychic Mewtwo. So yeah, Team Rocket's energy can only be attached to a Rockets Pokemon and is immediately discarded if it is not attached to a Rockets Pokemon. But when it is, it provides any combination or 2 in any combination of Psychic and Dark energy at once. So we could potentially even see some archetypes or some Pokemon that have Dark and Psychic in their cost. I'm actually thinking Dragon types. If there's any Dragon types, like Rocket's Dragon types that we've seen, the Dragon types have like types based on the colors of their like sprites and stuff. So if there's any Dragon types that Rocket have got hold of, you could potentially see some synergies there. But otherwise, this is going to be powerful for the Dark types, for the Psychic types that we see. And I think, it's blatantly obvious that we're going to see at least some Dark types on all of the like promotional pack material and stuff we've seen from the Rocket stuff. There's Arbok, there's Coughings, there's all of this kind of stuff. So we're going to see a lot of different Pokemon that this is going to be useful for, I suspect. And I think this is a very powerful trainer, or very powerful special energy, sorry. Any kind of like double energy always has to be considered. But when this is actually type-based double energy rather than just a double colorless style effect, that's pretty scary. That means that you can potentially power some attacks up very, very quickly. If it was just a double colorless energy, you could you could use things like Arrogant Order quite quickly. But in this case, we're going to be able to use Deletion Sphere with just an attachment plus, like with 2 attachments rather than 3. Which is, again, pretty scary, to be honest. You always have to be kind of wary of these double rainbow. I say rainbow, obviously it's limited to 2 types, but rainbow style effects, colored type of energies that rather than just colorless types. So yeah, very, very powerful card. I'm pretty convinced in Rocket's Mewtwo. Like I say, I'm really interested to know what you think down below. I think this card is really good. I think we obviously haven't seen everything yet, so there's naturally still going to be lots of things that we could see that buff it. But I think even what we've seen alone, just the engine behind this card, the numbers it can hit, I think the numbers it has, the HP it has and stuff like that, I just think it's too overstated for it to not be powerful. So yeah, really interested to know what you think down below. Let me know what your thoughts are on the Mewtwo, and also what your thoughts are on some of these supporters, because obviously these are also very, very powerful. Again, I'm pretty glad these are not limited, or these are limited to the Rocket archetypes rather than just being able to be used in everything. But yeah, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys in another video tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.